Some people who have had the virus have described symptoms as diverse as a lack of balance or even rashes on their toes. I suppose it comes down to the varying symptoms that people can display. What are people supposed to do? When do you know whether the symptoms you're experiencing actually fit the COVID-19 description rather?
We actually are learning about how diverse, the different presentations of this disease are. We originally thought it was very much like the original SARS, that it was a respiratory disease. And it seems in the initial state that that's what it is. It remains a respiratory disease. Its primary growth initially is in the nose and the back of the throat. And in those areas, when the virus grows there, you get respiratory symptoms, which is, cough, sore throat, and so on. And one of the things that people describe is this headache that you get. It's quite a throbbing headache, and you get fever. But now we're understanding that some patients don't even get any of those symptoms, but they get other unusual symptoms. And it's just a reflection of the rapid way in which our knowledge is growing of this disease. Let me give you an example. If you asked me, Cathy, 10 days ago, does this virus cause diabetes? And I would have said, what do you mean, cause diabetes? Well, it turns out there are now 3 papers that show that because the pancreas has beta cells that produce insulin, and those beta cells have the ACE2 receptor on them, this virus can go and attack those beta cells, and they kill the cells that make insulin, and they can make you diabetic. Now, I would never have guessed that. That just tells you how much we learn about this virus every week. I'm learning something new almost every day about this virus.
Is that part of the reason why patients who are diabetic, who have hypertension and obesity as the underlying comorbidities, then are harder hit in terms of risk to dying from COVID-19?
Yeah, so we think the comorbidities actually are unrelated to what I just described.
Yeah, okay.
Now, what I just described is about making them diabetic. If you're already an existing diabetic, especially an uncontrolled diabetic, you are at greater risk because for some reason, diabetics, hypertensives, and obese individuals, they have an overreaction to the virus. So for some reason, when the virus gets into their lung and starts growing in their lung cells, they produce an immune response that is a dramatic overkill. It's called a cytokine storm. Literally, we call it a storm because so many cytokines. Cytokines are little proteins that are signals. And it's something like, the general of the army standing on a hill and shouting, mobilize the army, the defense force, the navy, the air force, everybody. And so your entire immune system, large parts of, they're all coming now to deal with this virus. That overreaction is what causes most of the problems. The way in which this overreaction, because the virus is not a particularly problematic virus. We can sort of clear it with antibodies. But this immune response becomes a problem. And so now we have a better understanding that a drug like dexamethasone can suppress some of that overreaction. And that's why these immunosuppressants actually help you in patients who are diabetic. And diabetics, for some reason, have this overreaction much more commonly than others.
All right. Professor Karim, there's another question that I want us to look at, and it is in fact not the question that we've put up on screen, apologies to the team, but new research coming out of Spain on the issue of herd immunity is showing that it might not necessarily be achievable. Why is that? Because initially we were told that herd immunity would be what protects large numbers and groups of people from actually contracting the virus or becoming severely ill from the virus.
Yeah, I think, we knew right from the beginning that, talking about herd immunity was really not a good strategy. Any attempt to try and achieve herd immunity would be problematic. It's problematic because of the first question you asked me. We don't know if somebody who had the disease before is going to be protected next time. If you can't answer that question, then you can't talk about herd immunity. But let's for argument's sake, say that if you've had COVID, you won't get it again. Let's for argument's sake say that. So what proportion of the population would need to get COVID in order to get to herd immunity? Well, that differs. In some settings it will be lower, in other settings it will be higher. We can do a rough calculation based on R0. Based on R0, rough calculation would suggest we probably will need about 60 to 70% of the population to get infected. If we had that situation, that translates to what? About nearly 40 million people in South Africa. I mean, we can't get to that stage where you're going to have 40 million people just in one country. The whole world has just 12 million people infected with this virus. So that's not really a prospect. It's not a real strategy, and it's not a way to go. And so, Sweden was the country that said that that's their strategy. And of course, when they did the studies in Stockholm, they showed that only 7.3% are positive. 7.3%, and when in Stockholm, when they have one of the highest death rates. So imagine if they had to get to 60% of the population. I mean, it would be disastrous. So we really have a different strategy. And our strategy is to deal with the first wave and hope that, with enough prevention measures, that first wave is not too big. And then to just fight off little outbreaks, as we've seen now in Australia. Australia contained the virus, and then 2 days ago there was an outbreak in the flats in Melbourne, and they instituted a lockdown in these flats in Melbourne. So we all are going to basically have a strategy along those lines in the hope that in the next 18 to 24 months there'll be a vaccine.
All right.
And there's no guarantee we'll have a vaccine. Humanity has never made a vaccine against a coronavirus before. This is the first time, so we don't know if it's even doable. We hope it is, and I'm pretty optimistic that it is. But yeah, it might never happen, but if it does happen, it might take a while. So that's our strategy.
Sounds like we're in a real state of flux indefinitely, which I think, the two issues compounded make it even more difficult for us to deal with COVID-19. Professor Salim Abdool Karim, thank you for your time.